The chaotic student house of the young ones once felt like pure punk-fueled comedy at its wildest. But looking back from 2026, the real story behind its cast takes a darker turn. Catastrophic accidents, hidden love entanglements, and tragic endings no script could have written. What looked like anarchic fun on screen was shadowed by very real consequences off it. This is the then and now truth you never imagined. Rick Mayall as Rick, the people's poet, was a self-important, hypocritical, and utterly obnoxious brat. But under Rick Mayall's performance, the character became strangely charismatic. Born on March 7, 1958, in Harlow, Essex, Rick was just 24 years old during The Young Ones. He didn't just play Rick, he lived in him with all the exaggeration and explosive energy, turning screaming into a distinct art form. But Rick Mayall's real life was a script filled with harsh twists. The biggest scandal of his life was a bitter love triangle when he abandoned Lise Mayer, who had co-written The Young Ones with him and was pregnant with his child, to marry Barbara Robin. This act once caused the London artistic community to turn its back on him, labeling him a betrayer. His career subsequently suffered under the weight of epilepsy following a catastrophic quad bike accident in 1998, which nearly killed him and left him dependent on painkillers and sedatives for the rest of his life. Rick's final years were a tragic transition between glory and illness. Although he always appeared playful in public, the reality was that Rick struggled with mental breakdowns and severe memory loss due to the side effects of his epilepsy medication. He felt frozen out by major broadcasters who believed his comedic style had become outdated. With a net worth of approximately $5 million, he was not lacking in material wealth, yet he craved the recognition of the modern audience. Rick Mayall passed away on June 9, 2014, at the age of 56. He died at his home in Barnes, London, after a sudden heart attack shortly after returning from a morning jog. His passing at the time shocked the nation because it was so unexpected. He left behind a massive legacy for the world of comedy, proving that even though life is riddled with mistakes and pain, laughter remains the sharpest weapon against fate. Adrian Edmondson as Vivian Bastard. Adrian Edmondson turned Vivian into the punk medical student with stars on his face and an insatiable appetite for destruction. Born on January 24, 1957 in Bradford, Yorkshire, Adrian was only 25 years old when he first brought Vivian's madness to the screen in 1982. This role helped Adrian become one of the most powerful faces of the alternative comedy wave in Britain. However, behind that armor of nonchalance was the ghosts of expectation and lingering pain. Adrian grew up under the iron discipline of his teacher father, enduring corporal punishment and the confinement of boarding school. He later admitted that it created a vast hollow in his psyche. The pinnacle of his personal tragedy was the sudden death of his soulmate and creative partner, Rick Mayall, in 2014. Rick's death was not just the loss of a colleague, it completely shattered Adrian's spirit for comedy, leading him to vow at one point that he would never perform comedy again because there was no one left to play with. In recent years, the public has seen a more quiet and contemplative Adrian Edmondson. He has gradually moved away from loud, chaotic roles to find solace in literature and music. Now, in his late 60s, he faces the cruelty of time as he watches his former castmates pass away one by one. He has become more private, often reflecting on death and isolation in his memoir, Berserker. Despite having an estimated net worth of $10 million, Adrian does not use his wealth for ostentation, choosing instead a simple life, at times detached from the glitz of showbiz. As of 2026, Adrian Edmondson is 69 years old, living happily with his longtime wife, Jennifer Saunders, in the West Country. While no longer a constant fixture on television, Adrian still occasionally participates in theater projects and writing. He also spends most of his time on his passion for folk music and caring for his grandchildren. He remains a living legend for us today, Nigel Planer as Neil Pye. If ever a man could make the smell of lentils and damp wool drift through a television screen, it was Nigel Planer as the terminally heavy hippie Neil. Born on February 22, 1953, in Westminster, London, he was 29 years old when he first donned that iconic floor-length coat in 1982 to become the house's favorite punching bag. Nigel turned a depressed pacifist into an unlikely chart-topping pop star. But beneath the peace and love headband, Nigel's real life was often far more turbulent than a bad trip. He navigated the wreckage of 2 failed marriages, first to Anna Park and later Denise Flanagan, struggles that left him emotionally weathered and often retreating from the very fame that defined him. During that time, he fought a grueling internal battle against being locked in the 1980s. He felt the industry was trying to suffocate his versatility. This professional claustrophobia often made the laughter of the audience feel a world away from his own reality. As he grew older, the tragedy of watching his era's comedy icons vanish one by one took a heavy toll on his spirit. He moved into the world of children's books and voice acting, finding a new kind of peace away from the physical demands of the stage. However, the sting of being a legacy act in a digital world has occasionally brought a touch of cynicism to his outlook. As of 2026, Nigel Planer is now 73 years old. He lives a low-profile life in London, occasionally popping up for a documentary or a special voice project, but he has largely hung up his acting shoes. These days, he's more likely to be found immersed in his writing or enjoying the quiet of his garden. Christopher Ryan as Mike the Cool Person. While the others were busy tearing the house down, Christopher Ryan was the shady, pint-sized Don of the group, playing Mike with a briefcase full of scams and a swagger that far outpaced his height. Born on January 25, 1950 in London, Ryan was 32 when the sitcom launched, standing as the only member of the quartet who seemed to have a plan, even if it was usually illegal. He was the vital straight man to the madness to keep a sense of shady decorum while his roommates were head-butting walls. However, the cool person persona was a far cry from the quiet, persistent struggle Ryan faced in the cutthroat world of British acting. Being the shortest and perhaps most understated member of a legendary cast meant he often had to fight twice as hard for recognition. This forced him into a life of relentless professional hustle, taking on countless minor roles just to stay visible, leaving him feel somewhat isolated from the massive fame his peers enjoyed. The last few years have been a somber period of reflection for Chris, especially as the survivor's guilt of outliving his more boisterous co-stars like Rick Mayall and Robbie Coltrane settled in. The loss of his old friends hit him with a profound sense of mortality, causing him to retreat even further from the public eye. He has dealt with the typical creaks and aches of aging, which eventually forced him to slow down his once busy schedule. As of 2026, Christopher Ryan is 76 years old. Living reclusively in London, he has almost entirely stepped away from the industry, preferring the company of a few close friends over the glare of the cameras. You won't find him on social media or at glitzy reunions, because he is enjoying a well-earned retirement. Robbie Coltrane as Dr. Carlyle. No one could forget the commanding presence and gravelly Scottish baritone of Robbie Coltrane in A Posh Doctor. Dr. Carlyle. Born Anthony Robert Macmillan on March 30, 1950, in Rutherglen, he was 32 when he brought his massive charisma to the young ones, effortlessly holding his own against the scrawny, punk-fueled energy of the main cast. However, that larger-than-life frame eventually became a source of profound physical hardship for Robbie. During his 1990s peak, while winning 3 consecutive BAFTAs for the gritty series Cracker, he was privately battling a heavy dependency on alcohol and the emotional fallout of his 2003 separation from Rona Gemmell. The most grueling struggle was the severe osteoarthritis that eventually destroyed the cartilage in his knees. By 2019, the man who once dominated every room he entered was forced to spend his days in a wheelchair, enduring 24-hour physical pain that many fans never realized was there. The transition from global superstardom in Harry Potter to the quiet isolation of his remote Stirlingshire farmhouse was a bittersweet chapter. Living as a near hermit, Robbie struggled with the frustration of a mind that remained brilliant while his 20-stone body slowly failed him. Despite the physical prison his health had become, he maintained his sharp humor in his final filmed appearances, though he was often in too much agony to stand for more than a few moments at a time. Robbie Coltrane passed away on October 14, 2022, at the age of 72 in a hospital in Larbert, Scotland. His death was attributed to multiple organ failure, sepsis, and a lower respiratory tract infection. He left behind a legacy of 114 acting credits and a void in the industry that hasn't been filled since. Alexei Sayle as the Belowski family. Mentioning Alexei Sayle instantly brings back memories of the eccentric landlord with a penchant for fourth-wall-shattering rants. Born on August 7, 1952 in Liverpool, he was 30 years old when he became the show's resident surrealist. He didn't just play a role. He inhabited an entire dynasty of Belowski cousins and train drivers, providing the unpredictable backbone that made the 1982 sitcom so uniquely sharp. Behind the scenes, Alexei's path was often defined by the friction of his political convictions. Even after winning an international Emmy for Alexei Sayle's Stuff in 1988, he frequently found himself at odds with TV executives, feeling professionally isolated for his refusal to tone down his satirical bite. This intellectual defiance brought its share of stress, particularly as he struggled to outrun the shadow of his 1984 chart topper, Ulo John, Got a New Motor, which threatened to turn a serious satirist into a fleeting pop caricature. As the years rolled on, the frantic shouting of his youth gave way to the steady, thoughtful pace of a celebrated author and radio host. He found a new kind of peace in literature, publishing sharp-witted memoirs like Thatcher Stole My Trousers, 2016, that detailed the grit of the early comedy circuit. Trading the high-decibel stage for the intimacy of BBC Radio 4, he began to view his outsider status as a badge of honor rather than a professional burden, reflecting on the industry's changes with a trademark mix of wisdom and skepticism. As of 2026, Alexei Sayle is 73 years old. He continues to live in London with his wife, Linda, his partner of over 50 years, and remains active through his podcast and imaginary sandwich shop. Though the frantic energy of the 80s has settled, he remains a sharp-tongued intellectual to become the loudest voice in the room. Paul Bradley as Warlock. If the show's surrealism ever needed a touch of mystical absurdity, Paul Bradley was the man to provide it, playing the bumbling warlock with a perfectly confused charm. Born on May 19, 1955, in Barnet, Hertfordshire, he was 27 years old when he brought his shaggy-haired, gentle energy to the chaotic world of the young ones. While the lead four were busy destroying the set, Paul offered a softer, more whimsical brand of comedy. Outside of the cult comedy bubble, Paul's career was a long game of shedding his hippie image to become one of the most trusted faces on British television. He spent 6 high-pressure years as Nigel Bates in the soap opera EastEnders, 1992 to 1998. This role brought him massive fame, but also led to periods of intense creative burnout. He often felt the sting of typecasting and struggled with the anxiety of the industry's short memory. The shift into his later career saw him finding a new, stable home in the medical drama Holby City, where he played Elliot Hope for over a decade, starting in 2005. This long-term commitment provided financial security, but also a different kind of exhaustion, the invisible struggle of an actor locked into a single character for 10,000 hours of television. Behind the scenes, he navigated the quiet loss of close friends and the inevitable aging of the industry, finding solace in his folk band, the Co-Stars. As of 2026, Paul Bradley is 71 years old. He currently lives in London and continues to balance his love for music with occasional acting roles in theater and audio dramas. For us, he is a man who successfully navigated the treacherous waters from 80s anarchy to mainstream stardom. Stephen Frost, as policeman/bank vault manager. Stephen Frost perfectly portrayed the flustered policeman or the panicked bank manager who constantly bore the brunt of the students' anarchist antics. Born on December 28, 1955 in Redruth, Cornwall, the 27-year-old actor used his tall frame and booming voice to create a hilarious contrast, playing serious officials who inevitably crumbled into a heap of nerves whenever Vivian or Rick entered the room. He represented the rigid establishment that was always one joke away from a total nervous breakdown. However, the laughter he triggered on screen masked a life of relentless high-pressure hustle. As a founding pillar of the Comedy Store Players, Stephen lived a professional, high-wire act, taking a significant mental toll. He often grappled with the utility player trap, the frustration of being the industry's go-to supporting actor in hits like Blackadder Goes Forth and Whose Line Is It Anyway, while rarely being given the chance to lead his own project. This constant need to prove his worth in the background of more famous peers created a quiet, enduring tension throughout his career. In more recent years, the transition into a veteran statesman of comedy has been a reflective period for Stephen. He has navigated the physical creaks of aging that naturally slow down a high-energy performer, all while watching the raw, dangerous comedy world of the 80s become increasingly polished and corporate. This shift left him feeling like a relic of a more rebellious age, yet he refused to retire, instead using his decades of experience to mentor the next generation of improvisers. As of 2026, Stephen Frost is 70 years old. He continues to live in London and remains a regular, beloved fixture at the Comedy Store, proving that his improvisational reflexes haven't lost their edge. Ruth Burnett as Goldilocks/Cinderella. Ruth Burnett brought a surreal, storybook charm to the show's grimy punk world, drifting through the chaos as a floating Goldilocks or a bewildered Cinderella. Born on January 21, 1957. In London, she was 25 years old when she channeled these ethereal storybook icons into the household's madness, providing a dreamlike contrast to the students' dirt-streaked reality. Her performance was a vital part of the show's visual irony, proving that even in a house full of anarchist students, there was always room for a bizarre fairy tale twist. Off-camera, Ruth's life followed the quiet, determined path of a dedicated character actress navigating a notoriously fickle industry. She spent the late 80s and 90s building a versatile portfolio, notably appearing in the long-running police drama The Bill, 1993, and the gritty medical series Casualty, 1995. However, the constant hustle to stay relevant required a grit that her delicate on-screen characters never had to show, as she balanced the uncertainty of freelance life with a deep-seated passion for the craft. In more recent times, Ruth has embraced a more private existence, moving away from the high-pressure world of television to find a different kind of fulfillment in local arts and personal projects. She faced the natural transition of aging with a quiet dignity, trading the stress of constant auditions for a more grounded life in London. She has maintained her privacy fiercely, choosing to let her diverse body of work, including her time in the drama Midsummer Murders, 2001, speak for itself. As of 2026, Ruth Burnett is 69 years old. Living a peaceful life in London, she has largely retired from the screen, enjoying a well-earned anonymity away from the cameras. She is viewed with great affection by those who appreciate her range, standing as a reminder of the show's ability to blend the gritty with the whimsical. Jim Barclay as racist policeman/policeman in comic strip. Jim Barclay was the man tasked with the show's most biting social commentary, playing the bigoted racist policeman whose shocking behavior. Born on January 23, 1952 in Shoreham by Sea, The 30-year-old actor used his background in the political agitprop theater movement to deliver a performance that was as uncomfortable as it was hilariously provocative. He wasn't just a guest star. He was the face of the establishment gone wrong, providing the necessary friction that fueled the students' rebellious energy. However, the stigma of playing such a controversial role occasionally made his professional journey a complex one to navigate. Jim spent years balancing his reputation as a fearless political comedian with the needs of a mainstream career. He proved his versatility through long-running roles in shows like London's Burning, 1988, and appearing in the legendary comedy series Blackadder Goes Forth, 1989. Despite these successes, he often felt the weariness of being a utility man. In his later years, Jim returned to his roots in stand-up comedy and live performance. He faced the inevitable slowing down of the industry with a gritty realism. Despite the physical toll of a career spent in the satirical trenches and the health challenges that come with reaching his 70s, he remained a defiant figure in the acting community. He channeled his experience into activism, becoming a prominent member of the Equity Actors Union to fight for better conditions for his peers. As of 2026, Jim Barclay is 74 years old. He continues to live in London and remains active in the fringe theater scene, still possessing the same sharp, opinionated wit that defined his 30s. Today, he is still respected as a truth-teller in the industry. Ben Elton as Kendall Mintcake/Baz Ben Elton was the fast-talking, suit-wearing whirlwind who burst onto the screen as guest characters like Kendall Mintcake or Baz. Born on May 3, 1959, in Catford, London, he was just 23 years old when he brought his frantic, high-decibel energy to the young ones. Ben wasn't just a guest actor. He was the primary co-writer of the entire series, the mastermind who helped bridge the gap in 1970s slapstick. But the angry young man persona that defined his early career masked a life of relentless, high-pressure work that often bordered on total exhaustion. Ben spent the late 80s and 90s navigating a grueling creative schedule, famously co-writing the legendary Blackadder 2, 3, and 4 while simultaneously launching his own award-winning series, The Man from Auntie, 1990. This incredible output came with a price. He often faced vicious sellout accusations from his peers for becoming part of the mainstream he once mocked. This professional tension led him to eventually move halfway across the world to Australia to escape the relentless British tabloid cycle. In more recent times, Ben has undergone a fascinating transformation from a frantic comedian into a respected elder statesman of the arts. He faced the somber reality of losing his closest creative partners, most notably Rick Mayall, an event that hit him with a profound sense of mortality and led to a period of creative reflection. He pivoted toward the stage, writing the massive global hit musical We Will Rock You, which ran for a staggering 12 years in London's West End. Despite the physical toll of decades of touring and the natural slowing down of his late 60s, he has maintained a razor-sharp intellect, using his later stand-up tours to tackle modern issues like social media and the climate crisis with the same fire he had in 1982. As of 2026, Ben Elton is 67 years old. He currently splits his time between Fremantle, Western Australia, and London, remaining as prolific as ever with new novels and theater projects. While the frantic, shouty delivery of his youth has matured into a more measured, thoughtful style, his influence on British culture remains undeniable. Terry Jones as Drunk Vicar. If there was anyone who could make a stumbling, slurred sermon feel like a piece of high art, it was the legendary Terry Jones in his unforgettable guest spot as the Drunk Vicar. Born on February 1, 1942 in Colwyn Bay, Wales, Terry was 40 years old when he brought his chaotic, Python-esque energy to the house in 1982. As a founding member of the iconic Monty Python troupe, his appearance was a symbolic passing of the torch from the masters of 1970s surrealism to the new, loud, punk-fueled generation of the young ones. However, the hilarious absurdity Terry projected on screen eventually gave way to a deeply somber and challenging reality behind the scenes. Terry was a relentless polymath, a man who directed cinematic landmarks like Monty Python's Life of Brian, 1979, and authored over 20 scholarly books on medieval history. But this brilliant mind began to face a cruel decline in 2015 when he was diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia, a rare form of dementia that specifically targets the ability to speak and communicate. The final chapter of Terry's life was a testament to his resilience, even as his world grew increasingly quiet. He spent his remaining years surrounded by the music and books he loved, though he could no longer participate in the sharp intellectual banter that had been his trademark for decades. He left behind a legacy that includes a BAFTA Special Award for Outstanding Contribution to Film and Television. Terry Jones passed away on January 21, 2020, at the age of 77 at his home in Highgate, London. The cause of death was complications from his battle with frontotemporal dementia. He remains the vicar of laughter. So after all, the chaotic, punk-fueled legacy of the young ones remains as sharp today as it was in 1982. While time has taken many of these legendary performers from us, the all-out energy they brought to our screens continues to echo in the hearts of fans worldwide. As we look back at the cast in 2026, we celebrate not just the laughter they gave us, but the defiant spirit of an era that changed British comedy forever. Which of these legendary characters was your absolute favorite? Share your memories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to honor the timeless madness of the Balowski household.